Okay, on to the next Skip the Line reaction, and this is once again for Tom Bredesen. So thanks very much. I think you requested, I think, like 4 or 5. I'm not entirely sure if this is also a Norwegian artist. I'm sure it is. You did say that you were going to suggest only Norwegian artists. So this is called Girl in Red, Serotonin. Never heard of her, or never heard of the band, and never heard of anything, never heard of the song. So it's going to be super interesting to see what this is about. And yeah, so if you guys want to join the Sphere as well, you can. I'm leaving the link down in the description. You can access the Sphere. For $2.70 you get access to additional content every single month, and you can also request a Skip the Line reaction, which is what this is. That comes at a higher fee, but then you do skip the entire line and you get your reaction almost immediately. You can do that, or you can request a priority reaction, which is a perk of being a member of the Sphere. And if you don't want to do any of that, you can just join the Fable community, which is completely and utterly free. It's kind of like a social media page. You can create your own profile, you can post, you can create groups, and you can engage with myself and the Cucumber Squad, which are always there. That link is also down in the description, so go take a look at that. Girl in Red, Serotonin, man. Let's see what we've got. Let's go.
I'm running low on serotonin. Chemical imbalance got me twisting things. Stabilize with medicine. There's no depth to these feelings. Dig deep, can't hide from the corners of my mind. I'm terrified of what's inside. I get intrusive thoughts like cutting my hands off, like jumping in front of a bus, like how do I make the stop when it feels like my therapist hates me? Please don't let me go crazy. Put me in a field with daisies, might not work, but I'll take a maybe.
That's heavy. I mean, I know that, you know, she's trying to keep this upbeat, but what she's talking about here is actually some really, really serious things, right? And you do get that. You get those situations where, you know, real situations where people do have a chemical imbalance in their brain, and it can be alleviated somewhat, or at least numbed to a certain extent or to a certain degree by medication itself. I'm a little bit. I'm not saying that the medication doesn't work. I think the medication, in some instances, is absolutely pertinent. I think it's needed. Right, and obviously only a health professional will be able to tell you that, whether you need it or you don't need it. My only concern at the moment with a society, my concern at the moment with a society that is so profit driven and so and actually, I mean, I'm trying to see if I can put this in the correct way. Firstly, we're dealing with one side of society which is heavily profit-driven, right? Which take a look at these situations and they'll be like, okay, how do we profit off that, right? And then, because there might not be enough clientele over there, they try and create more of it. And we've already got a situation with social media, which is creating these psychological issues where there, in fact, was none before. Right, it's almost like it's a social contagion that we're now doing, because it's a great thing to sort of profit. Like, we're creating clients for the pharmaceutical industries, right? And I just feel like there's the ethics and the morality. And this is not a knock against the fact that maybe antidepressants do work. Well, although there was a study that came out that I read recently that antidepressants to a certain degree don't actually work, and they've been told that it does work for years and years and years and years. Or I think the study was like, they can't link the fact that antidepressants work with actually not curing but actually alleviating depression. It's like, there was a study like that. I can't really remember the ins and outs of that, but it was something about antidepressants where, in fact, those things, you know, there was no link to it actually doing anything for its patients to a certain degree. It's a very, very recent study. You can go take a Google and you'll probably find it. And that's what I find is that, you know, in a world of corporate greed and distrust of the institutions that are meant to be truthful, ethical, moral institutions, like the institution of medicines and things like that, that it cannot be profit driven. There needs to be a sense of morality for doing the right thing, that's very quickly being eroded, with lots of articles and lots of sort of like whistleblowers and all these things that are coming out where it shows that these people are actually, they're doing it for profiteering reasons and not in fact to help people, right? Just take a look at the opioid crisis in the United States and what they did over there, right? Under the veil of, okay, no, we're going to help people again. It's again under the veil of compassion, and look at what they cause under there. And these were experts that were telling you, no, this is good for them. This is good to do. And we're finding it like, in the past, let's say past 2 decades, we found that that's been eroding, and there's a lot less trust in these institutions to do the right thing for people, right? To benefit their health. It's almost like they want to create the problem to get more clients, and that's my biggest issue with today. How to remedy that and what to do and how to do and the ins and outs of that, I can't possibly tell you. I'm not a professional, and I'm not a professional in that field. I'm not one to say that these drugs work or don't work at the end of the day, but I do feel that people really do need to look into this deeply and not just sort of like jump at the first opportunity to take drugs for something that they might not need, because it is very corporate driven. It is very, sort of nefarious to a certain degree, specifically in this day and age. But then again, when it comes to something like this, you obviously have to seek professional help, and you'll have to go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist and see, what are your best options. Obviously, your best options would not be to turn to the medication route, but there are people that genuinely need to turn to those routes, and they are professional, brilliant psychologists who would say, like, listen, if we can't remedy this, and a pill is going to at least help you to feel somewhat normal on a daily basis, then I guess you take the pill, essentially, while we try and see if we can alleviate it in other natural ways too. But I really do want to sort of also drive home the idea of immediately turning to the pharmaceuticals for issues. I find that yes, they have helped a lot. Medical technology and medical advancements have helped humanity a lot. But there's a lot in there. There's a lot of skeletons in the closet over there that I also feel that it created a lot of problems that we never had, and now we do have, because they created a customer base for themselves, essentially. So again, that's not my professional opinion, because I'm obviously not a psychologist. I'm not I think I'd always ask you to go and seek that from a professional and look at your options, essentially. Just me personally, I'm just very skeptical of the pharmaceutical route being the first route that you take. I think it's probably one of the routes that you take once you've exhausted every other route, because in today's day and age, my trust in the pharmaceutical big corporates is eroding fast, unfortunately.
Maybe, been breaking daily, but only me can save me. So I'm capitulating, crying like a fucking baby. I don't wanna be sabala, I don't wanna be cicada, I don't wanna be I'm running low on serotonin, chemical imbalance got me twisting things, stabilized with medicine. There's no depth to these feelings, dig deep, can't hide from the corners of my mind. I'm terrified of what's inside. I get intrusive thoughts, like burning my hair off, like hurting somebody I love. Like, does it ever really stop? When there's control, I lose it. Incredibly impulsive, so scared I'm gonna end up doing something stupid, but I try to contain it. Oh, it gets so draining. It's like my heart is failing. Every night I'm contemplating. My inner voice is saying chop, so
will say it also is very important to look at yourself and to sort of look really like deeply into yourself and say, okay, this is a real problem I am having, or is it something that I'm trying to fit in within a trend? Because there's a growing trend on social media at the moment of depressed, so-called depressed youth. That is, they are saying it's like, oh well, I was born like this. It's my psychological problem. It's that kind of thing. I'm also very, very concerned that we are sort of shaping and molding the youth into people that are unable to deal with adversity, and because they're unable to deal with adversity, because they haven't been brought up to be strong, they've been brought up sheltered, and they've just been sort of hovered over the entire time, and they've never been able to face the consequences of their own mistakes, that when they face the real world, they immediately sort of like break down and go into a depressive state because they can't handle the world, because they can't handle adversity, right? It's also a very big concern of that, right? There is the diagnosable clinical depression, right? Which is 100% correct. Right? I speak about this with my wife all of the time. Absolutely, there's diagnosable clinical depression, which is real, and then there is the depression that these kids are purporting to have to get adulation from social media, to be like, shame, poor me, and stuff like that. And even if they feel down, like, there's a big difference between having a bad day and feeling down and being clinically depressed, right? Feeling down is, everyone feels down, everyone feels depression to a certain degree. All right, we're going to get depressed and we're going to get out of that. So you're going to have days and you're going to have days at the end of the day, right? But I think it's become a cool club. It's become the cool kids club to identify as depressed or mentally ill and things like that. And that's something that's very, very pernicious, and you've got to be very, very careful with that and joining those kind of mindsets, because what happens is it starts breeding. It's kind of like mushrooms, that these spores go out, and it's one person tries to pull the other person in, and because they want to be part of this cool kids club, they sort of identify in that way where they really are not, right? These are the privileged people having good lives, the majority of them, and it's the majority of them are coming from the West as well, very privileged societies, as opposed to societies like in Africa where they really do have nothing and they have all the reason to be depressed and they still carry on. So I think it's also something that you got to be very, very careful with, because it is currently it is a growing trend of, it's these teenagers that are so-called depressed, and it's either because they want to be part of a cool kids club, or because, yes, they do feel depressed. They're not clinically depressed, but they do feel depressed because they're too weak and too docile to actually deal with adversity in society, because they were too sheltered by their parents, right? And when they see the real world, right, they can't handle that, and everything sort of like crushes them, and therefore that's why they start asking for you to control your speech and what you say, and words are violent now and things like that. We've got to be very careful with that, because we have been bubble wrapping children for a while now, and these are the outcomes and the consequences of doing such a thing, right? And then here comes a very compassionate yet sort of evil corporation that comes in there. It's like, hey, I got to pull for that. I got to pull for that. What are you feeling? Oh, I've got to pull for that. You know what I mean? You don't need to like sort of introspect. I've got to pull for that. So you got to be careful. You've got to be careful. It really, there's two sides to this coin.
Serotonin, chemical imbalance got me twisting things. Stabilized with medicine. There's no depth to these feelings. Baby, can't hide from the corners of my mind. I'm terrified of what's inside.
Går det bra?
She falls straight through that.
känner i hjärtat att lyssna på blodpropp. Men kroppen liksom att hjärtat mitt slutar slå. Sånn at det liksom att jag følte att det blev ett sånt tom rör i kroppen.
It's cool. I mean, it's a cool song. I mean, I get the message over here. And I'm always for, you know, people speaking out like this. I mean, music is a form of therapy, and I think that if someone who's in this space can sort of channel that into positive things like making music, man, I'm all for it. In terms of a song as itself, it's cool. I think it's very sort of like new age poppy. It's not something that I like frequent on my playlist. But I'm not mad at the fact that she made the actual track, because it's a good starting point. It's a good starting point of at least acknowledging how you feel and not being in denial of that, essentially. So I think it's a good thing that she's channeled it this way. And again, it's we got to be very careful at what we're manufacturing, specifically with social media, when it comes to mental health, because yes, there are real issues of mental health, and then there is manufactured mental health. Like, you know what I mean? There's this manufactured thing of mental health going around on social media that everyone is pushing, which is it's a real thing that is happening. It's not something that we were dealing with before, but we're dealing with now because of technology and because of the fact that, you know, all of our young generation's time is being consumed by nothing but content that shows other people and other people's lives and how great their lives, and no one's putting their worst foot forward on social media. They're always putting their best foot forward. So there's a lot of incentive to feel shit about yourself, right? And yes, that can put you in depression, but not to be misconstrued with actual clinical depression that you're born with, and the fact that you're just feeling depressed because, like, maybe you should be taking other routes, like just stop going on social media, delete those social media accounts, and put your time into more productive things, as opposed to sort of, you know, being like a zombie and consuming content of other people's lives. That might very well change your life. So yeah, anyway, that's what I've got to say. I love you all. Peace, stay safe, peace, stay healthy, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.